In 1588, England triumphed over the Spanish Armada. 1747, many areas of the United States experienced the largest recorded snowfall. 1750, Benjamin Franklin publishes a proposal for an experiment to prove lightning is electricity. 1758, Benjamin Franklin stops printing Poor Richard's Almanac. 1780, the Great Hurricane of 1780 hits the Caribbean, destroying British and French fleets and killing an estimated 22,000. In 1841, President William Henry Harrison gave his inaugural address outdoors without a coat on, and he died a few weeks later of illness. We're fortunate to have regular access to weather forecasts and what's going to happen in the next few days or weeks. And so we're just kind of, you get it on your phone. You get a warning about your phone. Mine tells me if it's raining. Before photography, cameras, this is an engraving of a great September gale in 1815. And so they had no warning. It was the first major hurricane to hit New England in 180 years. The word hurricane was really not widely known. It came from natives of some of the Caribbean. So they called it the Great Storm or the Great Gale. It would have been classified as a Category 3 or 4 hurricane if they had the measurements and instruments we have now. And this is from Rhode Island. Depicts the destruction and chaos of the gale as it passed over Providence Bay. Lost, where you can see buildings, ships, everything. Newspapers listed the ships that were lost, but didn't include many names of people. So if you're going to do some genealogy, and also in this, all the town records or whatever might have been destroyed. So those are missing. They didn't have photography then, as I said, so this is a painting that depicts Rhode Island. Newspapers at the time described it as a violent storm that toppled church steeples and ripped up fruit trees as far as 85 miles away. It just went up the coast, the East Coast, from Long Island to New York. Shipping warehouses and ships were lost. A science professor at Harvard noted later that the hurricane was preceded by rains the previous day, but the barometer did not fall until the morning of the 23rd. Richter, he noted and recorded that the wind changed from northeast to southeast to south. And when the wind was out of the south, the rain slacked off and the clear sky was observed, even as the winds were their worst. And we know today that they experienced the high wall of the storm with that. This same person learned that the winds had hit 2 hours before in Boston, and that the winds had backed counterclockwise there instead. This led this man to conclude that the storm appears to have been a moving vortex. So this is the first notion of the movement that the hurricane does. It's not just a straight line of wind. The prevailing thoughts of that time, the assumption they thought the hurricanes were just great forward straight line surges of wind that originated in the tropics and came north. So in Providence, Rhode Island, they put a line on the building of how far the water came up. And people did that here with Camille and Ships were smashed against the docks and the shoreline farms were ruined. Thousands of livestock killed, crops flattened by powerful winds. By the time the storm blew over, at least 38 lives across New England were lost and millions of dollars worth of damage, not counting ships and lives lost at sea. So this would have a great impact on the area, on the people. Accounts of the hurricane came from first people of the Caribbean in Florida, Hurrakan, spelled a little different than the way we do. Before they were named as hurricanes, people referred to them as gales. The accounts from Native Americans was that there had been no storms like that for 200 years of that size. The Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale wasn't developed in 1971, so historians, as I said, say it's between a Category 3 and a Category 4 storm with 111 mile per hour and 156 mile per hour winds. It's typical of hurricanes, as we know, spread and destruction. Everything from the water coming in, the seawater, everything was covered in salt deposits, which destroyed much of the local flora and fauna. The tides rose 10 to 15 feet above normal. What were they, 30-something feet here for Katrina?
Yeah.
The steeple of the old church was bent over. The old South Church in Boston was bent over. And this part here is called the bow spar. The real damage was the effect on the economy, destroyed livelihoods, nothing to go to work to, businesses. This is Mount Tambora. And this is the way it looks now. It used to be much taller before it erupted. An explosion, it's recorded as the largest eruption on Earth, 1816. So this is not long after the hurricane, but it's in the South Pacific. 1816, and it's called the Year Without a Summer. And I'll get to that. It was 13,000 feet high. It blew up in 1815, and it erupted for 2 weeks, spilling the lava and burning the grasslands and the forest. The ground shook, so when you have an earthquake, you're going to have tsunamis. And since tsunamis across the Java Sea, it's estimated that 10,000 of the island's inhabitants died instantly. It had been idle for thousands of years. It began rumbling in early April of 1815, and soldiers hundreds of miles away on Java thought they heard cannon fire, and they went looking for a battle. April 10th came the volcano's terrible finale. 3 columns of fire shot from the mountaintop. Flume of smoke and gas reached 25 miles into the atmosphere. The fire generated winds, which uprooted the trees. The ash and lava and particulate went down the slope at 100 miles an hour, destroyed everything in its path. This ash continued to rain down for weeks. Houses were covered in it and collapsed. And we didn't have fresh water, was very scarce. Tons of volcanic dust floated around the Earth's upper atmosphere, shrouded and chilling the Earth for many months, causing a dramatic climate cooling shift worldwide. Crops failed as frost struck a year later during the summer of 1815 in New England. Delaware farmers complained about the price of corn. Masses of people left the Northeast at this time. They couldn't grow crops. The ash covered everything, so it was dark. The they said in May that the weather turned backwards to the local people, what they called it. On July 4th, water froze in cisterns and snow fell again, with Independence Day celebrants moving inside churches where hearth fires warmed things a little bit. Thomas Jefferson had retired to Monticello after completing his second term as president. He had such a poor corn crop that year that he applied for a $1,000 loan. 1816 produced the only instance of zero tree growth as you measure it by looking at the rings of the trees in all over the Northeast. The failing crops and rising prices continued 1815 to 1816, and this threatened American farmers. So some people migrated south. I personally think maybe, I don't know if my ancestors were north or not, but that would be the time they moved down to South Carolina and Georgia, escaping the frost. They had snow and frost up, in the summertime. Thousands left New England for what they hoped to be a more hospitable climate west of the Ohio River. Twice the usual number of people left Vermont in 1816, 1817, a loss of some 10,000 to 15,000 people to that state. So as a result of that migration, Indiana became a state in 1816 and Illinois in 1818. It didn't only happen in America, it was worldwide. It wasn't much in the southern hemisphere. It was contained mostly in the northern hemisphere. The revivalists, people would interpret these changes, everything being backward and weather and killing everything, it's something about the end times. So they had revivals. They prayed and fasted, trying to make a difference. And in an election, voters replaced 70% of the House of Representatives. It was 16 to 18. And it was not just here. In Europe, there was unrest. The poor people from the farm area came into the cities and protested and demanded rain. It rained nonstop in Ireland for 8 weeks. The potato crop failed. Then there was widespread famine. After the hunger came disease, typhus broke out in Ireland in 1816, killing thousands. And over the next few years, it spread through the British Isles. Starving families fled to America from Europe. We got a lot of Irish immigrants at that time with the potato crop failing. 1816 and 1817 were the leading age of the famine migrations. So, and this poor nutrition, as a result of this, the poor nutrition contributed to the first worldwide cholera epidemic. In Switzerland, though, near Lake Geneva, there were some people vacationing. Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and Mary, who would become Shelley's wife. And they set out a June storm reading a collection of German ghost stories. It was so gloomy. This is a painting, again, photography. It's a painting of what it looked like all over. So they read these German ghost stories, and they challenged one another to write horror stories. And Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. Byron had a narrative program called Darkness. The bright sun was extinguished. Morn came and brought no day. John Polidori wrote The Vampire. Mary Shelley later recalled that it was a cold and rainy time. So she started Frankenstein. This was another view by the same artist. It's possible that the eruption of the volcano may have encouraged Mormonism. One of the more unusual effects of the temporary climate change brought about by this eruption is it may have indirectly led to the development of Mormonism. Founder Joseph Smith's family was one of thousands that left Vermont during the freakishly cold winter. The Smith family settled in New York, where a teenage Joseph would go on to experience events that led to his publication of the Book of Mormon. So without photography, this is what we have. New Englanders called it 1800 and froze to death. Germans called it the year of the beggar. Some people called it the year of hunger. During those days of crop failures and death, there was not enough food for humans or animals. Horses became scarce. Carriages had to be abandoned. In 1817, the first two-wheel bicycle was invented by a German man, Karl Drais. It was named the Draisine, or running machine. It's running because it has no pedal, and you run. It had two wheels and it was propelled by your feet. It was the first. About 1860 pedals will be added. That was a long time. It was, people called it the hobby horse or the dandy horse. It was produced in Germany and France. 1868, 1869. The Great Lakes are connected, all five of them, they're inland seas. They're prone to sudden and severe storms, especially in late autumn when there's warm air, fuels and mixed gales. So the Great Lakes storms sank or ran aground more than 3,000 ships and killed in excess of 500 people. There are large shipping losses in the Great Lakes. Articles and letters about the need for some type of warning system began. I think it came about in like 1871, but after one of the worst storms, 4 days, which began November 16th, 1869, Americans realized the need to notify merchants and residents of future weather events. In those few days, 97 vessels suffered damage, 35 were total losses, and by some accounts exceeded 420,000. High winds broke telegraph poles in Chicago and made rescue and sailors difficult. 6 men drowned near Chicago trying to reach a schooner. The economic impact and loss of life during this 2 years prompted President Grant, U.S. President Grant, to sign into law the Storm Service, which is a forerunner of the Weather Service, National Weather Service. The Army would record the weather at sites across the country and telegraph warnings when surface air pressure began to drop. (1873 through 1877), there were locusts everywhere, and these young men are trying to catch the locusts to diminish the number of them that are destroying everything. So there were really a species of grasshopper in the swarming phase. They usually would be in the Rocky Mountains, but a jet stream facilitated movement to the plains where the heat helped them breed, so it became more. They devoured all crops in their path, sometimes fences, blankets, and wool. When the food was gone, the swarms moved on in a flying cloud. They caused an estimated $200 million in crop damage in Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and elsewhere. And in Minnesota, where Laura Ingalls Wilder witnessed the plague, described it on the banks of Plum Creek, one of her books. The locusts destroyed more than 13 million bushels of wheat, 7 million bushels of oats. The rasping whirring of their wings filled the whole air, and they hit the ground and the house with the noise of a hailstorm. Moving. The largest swarm of them was recorded in 1874. It covered 198,000 square miles. Only in that year, only one family in 10 had enough food for the winter. And the government relaxed the Homestead Act residency rules so settlers could seek temporary work elsewhere. And in 1875, Uncle Sam spent $30,000 on seed for the farmers. Less than 30 years later, the locusts mysteriously died. But that seems to be the first instance of government assistance to areas with disasters. The blizzards of January 1888 was called a children's blizzard in the Plains States. Children were caught in it at school. See, the teacher is leading a group of people. They would use a rope to stay together and walk together. This is a teacher taking the children. There were surprise blizzard in Montana, Dakota Territory, Nebraska, January 12 and 13. The temperature suddenly dropped to minus 20 degrees. Storm called students in school. That's what we call children's blizzard. Also, there was a cold snap in the Pacific Northwest from California that preceded that blizzard. And later in the season, weather also paralyzed the East Coast, where they had a warm winter with below normal precipitation. But about 400 people died. This is the blizzard in New York. More than 20 million in property damage. This is another view. Look at all the electric wires. There were over 400 deaths. Railroads shut down. Ships were grounded. Imports stopped, so that hit the economy. People were stranded at work in the middle of it. And this incident led to power companies putting new lines in the ground. I would not have enjoyed untangling that stuff. This is another view. There's a book on this, Blizzard, the Great Storm of '88, by Judd Kaplovich. Now we're going to go to the Galveston Hurricane, 1900. Galveston was the wealthiest city in Texas and the third richest in America. And it was the site of incoming freight ships, goods for the continent. So after this, they were cut off. The Great Blizzard dropped 40 to 50 inches of snow in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts. About 400 people died. So Galveston, how many have been to Galveston? It's a low-lying barrier island off of the Texas coast, so it's vulnerable to storms, particularly the 1900 hurricane. The day it struck, as I said, it was the wealthiest city. When it was over, few buildings remained. It's a Category 4 hurricane. I think I read that the government agencies didn't communicate with one another then. They were, each one is a group. But somebody I think in Cuba, one of the government workers in Americans that were serving in Cuba tried to warn the weatherman that was over Galveston, and I think he didn't take it. He did not accept that, and so it was pretty bad. Over 400 people died. The Weather Service instruments had blown away, but it was estimated that 135 mile per hour winds at landfall made it Category 4. Water swept away buildings as far as 6 blocks inland. We've seen destruction like that on the Mississippi coast. Between 6,000 and 10,000 people died. Rescuers dumped bodies at sea. When many washed back, they built funeral pyres. You can find a list of the recorded dead, as well as photos and oral histories, at the Galveston and Texas History Center. They have a website. Property losses total $28 to $30 million, which is $700 million today. And at that time, they couldn't build back quickly, so Houston became the center of trade and shipping. It was became the major commercial center. So then, another side of the destruction. There was flooding. So, with this weatherman, he did not go out and warn people. He wrote a book after that, so many people had died, describing how he got on his horse and rode around and warned everybody. And that didn't happen, but you can find him. Didn't want to frighten the residents, and there was no way to get out. They were 8.7 feet above sea level, and the surge was 15 feet. This is dead bodies. 2,000 left the island permanently when they could. 7,000 buildings destroyed. 3,800 were homes. $30 million in property loss. Communication depended on transportation. No one outside the island knew for 3 days. This slide shows them building up Galveston, raising the level of it. The 1900 hurricane remains the country's deadliest weather disaster. And they also built a nice seawall to protect them. Now, tornadoes. Over 3.5 hours in March 28 of 1925, a tornado averaging a quarter mile wide, at times growing to a mile, left a 219-mile path of destruction in Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. So it's a tri-state. Killed 689 people, injured more than 2,000. The people saw a low rolling cloud and didn't sense any danger. Among the 234 who died in Murfreesboro, Illinois, 17 children in the Longfellow School died. 4 towns were demolished, a total of 13 counties and 19 communities got the effects of it. And the same, you have on the outskirts of it, twisters that popped down in other areas. So other states had twisters, Kentucky, Tennessee, and other states have tornadoes, fire. You can read more about it at these links. In 1927, so this is 2 years after the Galveston, this is the Mississippi River flood of 1927. weeks of rain caused one of the most destructive river floods in U.S. history, when the Mississippi River topped levee systems and the Army Corps of Engineers had just proclaimed would withstand the rising waters. The worst breach happened in April at Mountains Ferry, Mississippi, just upriver from Greenville. Armed guards forced African American laborers to fill sandbags, though everyone could feel the levee was about to collapse. Trees, buildings, railroad embankments washed away. The entire Mississippi Delta was flooded. More than 10,000 refugees, mostly blacks. You can see the laborers here on this levee. And 10,000 people crowded onto the Greenville levee to get out of the water. And fearing loss of their labor force, the planters allowed only 33 white women and children to board evacuation barges. Red Cross provisions were distributed disproportionately among blacks and whites. The town leadership conscripted black cleanup workers at gunpoint, so they were not allowed to get on the ships and go north. So many white people did. Herbert Hoover suppressed his own investigative reports of refuge camp abuses. The floods killed 1,000, left 1 million homeless. Americans moved north in droves, so this is part of their migration. Within a year, half of the Delta's black population was gone. So again, the whole Delta was flooded, 1,000 people killed, 1 million homeless, black cleanup workers conscripted at gunpoint, and many moved north. Now, sure up, we have the Dust Bowl, 1933 through 39.
This is right now, just after camp. I won't try to sing a little song. And you can have it, your command, for you will be my bride. Yes, sir, I know you very fine.
What was worse than anything is when we had that damn Dust Bowl. There wasn't no vegetation whatsoever. And it just blowed all the time. You have to take sheets and stick them in a tub of water and hang them over the doors to keep the dust from coming in the house and getting in your lungs.
Yes, sir, I know you very fine for me, 60 acres wide. But who would stay with me at night while you are playing your cards? Madam, I never did do such.
I remember when my wife used to stretch a sheet over our bed, and you'd get up the next morning and write your name on top of that sheet in the dust. And it was finer than flour. It was awful. And we put up with that down there about, I don't remember anymore, but I'd say 6 or 7 years. It was bad. Sometimes you'd go to town in one of those dust storms to have to for supplies. You'd get in town, maybe couldn't get back home for 2 days and nights. It'd just blow like snow to where you couldn't see nothing. You couldn't find the road, and you just have to stay wherever it caught you. It'd drift the dirt right over the fence posts and fences, right over buildings. I've seen buildings 10 feet high, dirt drifted right over them. And them dirt storms. And once in a while you'd lose cattle. Like that dirt would get in their nose and just stop it up. Nose and eyes.
Madam, I never did do such a thing, for I never did think it was right. And if you will be my bride, brown, I won't stay away one night. Yes, sir, I know
The Dust Bowl was bad. There was 2 or 3 years that we just didn't raise anything hardly at all, and quite a few people left. That times were just real tough because the revenue was real low. Well, the men who stayed and battled through that and made it many of them became very wealthy because things were cheap, land was cheap, and the man that really tried and stayed in there and pitched got through, and then when he got through, he come out well.
Madam, I have a mule, and it works to the buggy well. I'll drink my wine and throw my cards in it. You can go to hallelujah.
When it was finished, 125 million acres of land were losing the topsoil. Topsoil blue. I didn't refine the source on that, but the topsoil blue as far as the Mississippi River and landed on the bluffs. And then what did we call the people that moved out to California and Oklahoma during this time? Okies. In 1837, California made it illegal to bring indigent persons into the state. 2.5 million Okies left Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and other states. Most went to California to work on farms. So where do you find records? Lost. Local histories, general histories, newspapers. Here's some places to search if you're interested in following up on any of these. Google Books. They have entire books that are out of print, digitized at these places. The Internet Archive, Hathy Trust, Project Gutenberg, and the Digital Public Library. LibIb is this below, and that is the web address for we have put our contents of our library into this LibIb. It's Association of Libraries. So people also can search them, and they can contact us if they want pictures of some copies. And John Steinbeck wrote about the migrants in the Grapes of Wrath. PBS has them here. You can find PBS recordings of American experience surviving the Dust Bowl. Well, I didn't make slides for that. And
Let's see, running errands to Shafter Camp. I'm going to try to...
no, let's stop you. You can find accounts in historical newspapers. A lot of newspapers are now digitized and online. Quite a few books on the different weather events. I'll talk you over down the adults. Uh-oh, it's okay. You can research historical records, local histories that people wrote and they were saved, weather websites, newspapers. The Library of Congress, I believe it is, has the newspapers digitized, so you can get those for free. The Genealogy Bank has newspapers. Newsbank is their site that has the newspapers. And then the other site of newspapers.com is a separate website that you can access on its own or through Ancestry. You can research the weather at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It has historical weather maps in their Central Library website dating back to 1871. The U.S. Signal Office, which was the first, it became the Weather Service. They started publishing weather maps in the War Department in 1871. And then the Signal Corps were transferred to the newly created Weather Bureau in 1891. And they changed it to the Department of Agriculture Weather Map. You see, if you're trying to search weather outside the country, then you're going to put in your search bar the country name and then weather to see if you get something that way, or historical weather. Ancestry.com and Family Search have digitized family books, all kinds of books that people have done through the years about the families and about such as this. Everyday life from her, how this affected them. You can research historical weather records, data, at NOAA.com. But the page has a disclaimer that it's no longer being updated. So I guess that's about all I've got to say about the weather. So, are any of you aware of ancestors that were caught in one of these and affected by it? Lost their homes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.